Meow, 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 meow. Everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey everybody, Cantonese Cat here. This is the chart for Bitcoin. I'm going to put up the monthly chart over here. As you can see over the last year and a half, the structure is very, very bullish. I'm going to give you a lot of reasons to why I don't think Bitcoin has topped yet. And there are a lot of them. Like, there are just like over 10 of them. I'm just going to go through one by one here. First of all, this is the monthly chart. You just look over here last year and a half. What do you see? Higher highs and higher lows. Higher highs and higher lows. Right now, it's trying to be in the process of trying to find a higher high. And this whole thing right here, when it's forming higher high and higher low, is a bull trend. Don't fight the trend. The structure is currently bullish. The other thing is, if you look at more in detail, look at the weekly chart, there are a lot of these kind of very characteristic candles that look like what we call like a hammer bottom candle. But a very nice hammer bottom candle over here that tapped in liquidity down below, and also trying to figure out whether or not there is demand down below, right? You actually have multiple of these hammer candles over here and over here. All of this are basically very, very bullish look to it. Tells you that there's a lot of demand underneath that's being tapped, and the market makers are pretty convinced that there's a pretty decent demand. Now it just needs to break above this resistance, which is close to the previous all-time high. These hammer bottom candles before each one of these big moves generally have a lot of these kind of candles that are showing you right here that tapped into liquidity, found support, and went up higher. You can argue that there are some, not so hammer looking hammer candles here that did the same thing, but you have one right here that pushed up higher. You have one right here that's very, very characteristic, went all the way down to 20,000 before this big giant green candle went up, right? So you all basically, these are all very, very bullish structures over here, and we just have a very, very bullish structure over here that tells us that most likely is going to end up pushing against this resistance before going higher. Now, how high is it going to go? I don't know. We'll talk a little bit about that. And also, how long does it take for it to break? I also don't know, right? But overall, this is a very bullish structure here, both in the monthly and the weekly. So higher highs, higher lows, bull trend. I don't think we're topped yet. There's not really any sign to say that it is. A couple other indicators I'm going to pull up. One indicator I like to pull up is the Black Cat L3 banker fund flow trend oscillator. You can see that really during the previous bull cycle, whenever you have increase in well flow, you might be at a juncture where you're getting a setup here. Even when price kind of goes sideways, you have increase in fund flow over here. That basically means they're a pretty decent setup for potentially a pretty parabolic move, right? Same thing over here. Price kind of really went sideways, went nowhere, but you see the significant increase in well fund flow over here, getting you ready for potential pretty explosive move upwards, right? So far, what has price been doing? Yeah, it went up here a little bit more. Yeah, sure, doubled in price. But really over the last 6 months, really 5 months, really have done nothing, right? And you continue to have increase in well fund flow. So it might be setting up for some potentially pretty expensive, explosive move going up. The other well indicator to look at is something called the MCDX Plus. The MCDX Plus gives you these indicators in terms of what the red here means that they're usually institutions and whales, and what the green over here generally means retail. Now, if you have increase in retail, generally it's not a good thing. You really want to push these retail out and have increase in whales to really try and tick over before you have a pretty nice move up, right? The yellow over here is just traders. Don't worry about that. Just ignore the yellow over here. But what you really want to see before big giant parabolic bull trend is you have increased trend of the whales coming in. So you have increase in redness over here. And you also have decrease in retail presence, which have decrease in green over here, right? See what happened over the last few cycles when that happened. When things get pretty parabolic afterwards, right? See what happened to the cycle before that, when it reduced in retail and increase in whales. We have a pretty big parabolic move that happened afterwards, right? So all these indicators so far are telling you that big money are in, and they are getting set up for potential explosive moves, so they can distribute the bitcoins to you at a higher price. That's kind of what it means. Generally the cycles go in terms of smart money trying to distribute assets at a high price to not so smart money. Going to the monthly chart here again, reason number 3 I want to show you is the Bollinger Band. First of all, with each of these parabolic bull trend you have a full Bollinger Band expansion, right? And with the previous bull trend, you have a full Bollinger expansion. So far, you really haven't had that quite just yet on the monthly. You have price just kind of gone sideways over here for months, and that actually ended up causing the Bollinger Band, especially a little Bollinger Band here, to kind of like contract it a little bit, right? Interestingly, I don't think this cycle doesn't really look like last cycle. So far, this cycle actually looks like the cycle before that, where you continue to have this kind of Bollinger Band squeeze, expansion, and then with price kind of goes sideways, you have a contraction over here, and then eventually you have these kind of sideways, maybe eventually just brought the Bollinger all the way down to the floor, to the negatives. That's when you have a full Bollinger expansion. That's when a really, really parabolic bull trend is happening. Right now, we don't really quite have that just yet. We did have the initial Bollinger Band expansion, and the upper Bollinger Band continues to expand, which is probably going to bring price to go a lot higher, but we don't quite have that full lower Bollinger Band jaw drop all the way down to the floor. We don't quite have that yet. I think if anything, this look over here may be a little bit more equivalent to like over here, and we're still waiting for the big parabolic trend to kind of come. So far, there's not really any sign to show that things have really been totally exhausted. Plus, we've been really going up in a very, very controlled manner. We never really have more than 3 or 4 candles closing above the upper Bollinger Band, and whenever we do, we end up cooling down sideways and get back inside the Bollinger Band, right? So far, it's been going 1 candle out and the other candle touching back in, 2 candles out, 1 candle bring you back in, right? And then right now, we're trying to expand the Bollinger Band. Right now, at the top of the Bollinger Band, right there is probably going to serve as magnet to continue to drag price up higher, and as price continue to drag price up higher, it's going to also expand the Bollinger Band together along with it. So right now we're not really exhausted, unlike the previous cycle where you have candles and bam, 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 right? 7 candles in a row about the upper Bollinger Band. That's a trend exhaustion. You pay for it later. Right? What about the cycle before that? Well, 3 candles up, 2 candles down inside the Bollinger Band. 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down. It's not really until maybe around April of 2017 that's when things get really explosive, right? Candles number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all closing outside the upper Bollinger Band. That's a trend exhaustion. We don't really have that yet, do we? Maybe 1 or 2 candles go outside and we went back inside. We don't even have a full Bollinger Band expansion quite just yet. So I don't think Bitcoin has topped it, and that's reason number 3. Reason number 4 has to do with the Ichimoku cloud. If you look at the beginning of each of these bull trend, you have something called a Tenkan-Kijun cross. Tenkan line is this blue line over here. It's also called a conversion line. It moves faster. It's a moving period average that calculates an average based on these movements, right? You have the red line over here, which is a lagging line. It's called the baseline. It's also called the Kijun. The Kijun, if it crosses underneath the Tenkan, it generally means you have a bullish cross. And wherever this bullish cross happens, you have continual upwards movement for another 12 to 18 months or so. The previous cycle, whenever you had the bullish cross over here, price didn't really top until 14 months later. And the cycle before that, whenever you had this bullish cross over here, price didn't really top until 19 months later. So just kind of give you an idea, I think we might still have at least another year to go, if not longer, in terms of bull trend. It may have just been recently started over here. Right? So that's also another reason why I don't think we've topped quite just yet. Another thing I also want to show you now that I have the Ichimoku cloud open here, I do want to show you not so much the monthly chart, but I'm going to go a little bit more microscopically here to the 2-day chart. Now, I'm just going to show you the cloud itself, and I did a video earlier, and I've been doing these videos to kind of show you, I think 2-day Ichimoku cloud has served as very, very good support and resistance. Support during bull market and resistance during a bear market, right? Support, support, support. We just literally bounced over the support here today and this week, right? Looks like a very, very nice week here so far. Got close to support, didn't really quite touch. But over here, down here, price initially broke down underneath, backtest the cloud over here, rejected, backtest, finally broke through, backtest, and got up higher, right? What happened before that? Backtested the bottom of the cloud, passed. What happened before that? Backtested the top of the cloud, passed, right? What about the bear market? Rejected, 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 and rejected, right? So all of these rejections and support over here is really basically telling you that for whatever reason, the 2-day Ichimoku cloud tends to be pretty good support and resistance, and we are just basically climbing our way out of it. And so far we have multiple bounces from it. It looks like it's finding support from this cloud. And once you found pretty decent support, I think the next move is probably going to end up being pushing up. Although we do have a pretty significant resistance up here, it does look like we have a little bit of a head and shoulder around here, building a lot of energy to potentially push you up, right? Especially just back to a very important support zone here that has worked out very well over the last few years. So we'll see what happens next, but that's another reason why I don't think we've topped quite just yet. Now, get rid of the Ichimoku cloud, look at the bull market support band. This is another reason why I don't think we've topped yet, is because we have this band over here called the bull market support band, consists of the 20-week simple moving average and the 21-week exponential moving average. Both of those combine together forming a band, and during bull market it tends to serve as support to push price up higher. We just tested this as support just about a couple months ago, right? Before that we tested support initially broke down underneath it, but found it was right back over to continue the bull market, right? We were able to convert the bull market support band during this period over here from resistance to support, back tested as support around 20,000, and then since then we haven't really looked back, right? Before that, during bear market, bull market support band also served as bear market resistance band. Resistance right there and resistance right there, right? So over here, what we're seeing over the last cycle is that things are actually very, very unhealthy here for about half a year, because it really didn't back test the bull market support band. It just kind of went way out, right? So that's why you get really completely exhausted. You really want to kind of test this and push it up higher, and we're doing just that, right? So I think the current bull market actually, this cycle actually looks a lot healthier compared to last cycle, where it just refuses to touch it, just wanted to go up and it get exhausted because it just ran a sprint, right? It didn't take its appropriate breaks. Or about the cycle before that? A lot healthier, isn't it? Back test, back test, back test, back test, back test, right? And over the last 3 months or so, actually probably a little closer to like maybe the last 3 or 4 months or so, it didn't really touch the bull market support band and it got exhausted, right? So that's kind of what you would expect to see at the bull market support band, and right now the band is pointing up and it just got tested as support, so most likely it's going to end up continuing upwards. Now, if it breaks underneath and back test it and then goes down, that's a different story. You're not really seeing that over here, are you? Which is why over here was particularly scary, because it broke down, back tested, but was actually able to push through. So this is actually a pretty decent move over here. But if a lot of times, like for example over here, it went down underneath the band, back tested it, failed to hold the support, went down, right? Back tested it again, failed to hold the support, went down further, right? We're not really seeing that. If anything, we just back test over here. It looks like it wants to go higher, but right now you're hitting some pretty important resistance over here to kind of get over. So we'll see what happens. But I have a feeling that it's gonna be able to overcome it. Reason number 6. Another reason as to why there's something called the MVRV-Z score. The MVRV-Z score has been very, very, very accurate in terms of trying to predict where Bitcoin has topped and where Bitcoin has bottomed. Whenever the number gets to close to around like 4 or 5 or so, that's when things really start to get heat up, and that's when you really start to think that you're getting to the top, if not close to the top, right? The score hit around like 4 or 5 over here at the 2017 top. It hits around the same level at around the April 2021 top. Although it went on and form a little bit of a slight higher high, the score never really went back up there. So a lot of people actually thought that the April 2021 was the technical top, which is not unreasonable to think about, because that's where it topped over here, the MVRV-Z score over here, right? And then also accurately predict the top previously, even on this cycle over here in 2013. Can it predict the bottom? Looks like it. You know, looks like whenever it hits too close to 0 or negative, that was really close to the bottom. over here. Like anywhere you bought over here was probably going to be a pretty decent buying opportunity. Anywhere you buy down here is going to be a very, very decent buying opportunity. Anywhere you buy down here when it touches zero, it goes a little bit slightly negative, was a very, very good buying opportunity. Although it didn't feel like it when you bought around 21,000, you see price going dropping down to like 15,000. It probably didn't feel like it, but that would have been a very, very good buying opportunity. Right. We're nowhere near that level. Right now, the MVRV-Z score is around like a 2.5 or something like that. So I think we still have potentially a ways to go here. And this score has been well known in the Bitcoin community. And I'm just basically showing you what I'm showing you. Another indicator is something called the Pi Cycle Top indicator. This indicator was generated after the 2017 top. They're trying to use two different moving averages and use a calculation to see whenever it is that they end up touching or crossing, that's when you can call the Pi Cycle Top. So what ended up happening was that it used calculation based on previous cycle whenever they end up crossing, and that you call it the top, and you really try and use these moving average cross over here trying to predict the next cycle, and it did accurately predict the next cycle cross around here. It actually did end up crossing over here at around April of 2021. And a lot of people actually thought that that was the technical top because it certainly looked like it was, right? Right now, we're not really quite at the cross quite just yet, right? Even though the lines got pretty close, but they can get pretty close for a very, very long time and still not end up crossing, right? The cycle before that, from like 2015, 2017, these moving averages, they keep on getting really, really close, but it's just never really crossed until the final top, right? So far there's not really any indication based on this indicator that we've crossed and that we've topped quite just yet. Looks like there probably is still a ways to go. How far does it go? I don't think anybody really knows truly. We can only speculate. That's another reason why I don't think that we've topped quite just yet. One more reason why I don't think so. Look at Bitcoin dominance. There's generally something that happens with each of the Bitcoin cycles is that generally after halving, not only does Bitcoin go up higher, but altcoins also end up having money being rotated to it. Typically, you end up having a drop of Bitcoin dominance probably around a few months after the halving, right? It happened last cycle. It happened the last cycle before that. And during this drop of Bitcoin dominance, altcoins really started to take off. Right now, you have just been having all kinds of altcoins being bleeding out against Bitcoin. You have like a little bit of a reverse parabola, if you will, a little bit around the top over here, if you will. The trend looks a little bit exhausted for Bitcoin dominance. And right now, I think there's a good chance that you might end up having money rotated from Bitcoin to altcoins, but that still hasn't happened yet. Obviously, like Bitcoin has been still outperforming over the month of June, and it's been doing very, very well against a lot of various altcoins. A lot of altcoins have been kind of still a little bit devastated by Bitcoin just going down a little bit, right? But that trend could potentially be changing over the next couple months or so, because that still hasn't happened. And generally, you're going to have a bunch of greedy folks that are going to take money out of Bitcoin and rotate over to altcoins to trying to get those altcoins to go up parabolically. That still hasn't happened. The euphoria still hasn't kicked in. So that's also a part of the reason why I don't think we've quite topped quite just yet. Now, there are a couple other reasons too. One is if you want to look at just a very, very simple thing, Bitcoin is generally thought to be a way to look at global liquidity, right? Because global liquidity, if they are having excess of global liquidity, where it's going to go? It's going to end up going to Bitcoin. It's not going to gold anymore. It's 2024. Is there any excess in global liquidity? Well, let's look at the US. We're no longer having quantitative tightening anymore. We actually restarted quantitative easing, right? We just have a little bit of a higher high over here on M2 money supply, a little bit of higher low over here in M2 money supply, and right now we're trying to find a higher high, right? It might just keep on going. But because of increasing global liquidity, there's not really any particular reasons to thinking that Bitcoin has topped at this moment. Another thing to look at global liquidity is, instead of looking at the M2 supply of the US money, Another way to look at it is also look at the Hang Seng. The Hang Seng Index is the China fund that's based in Hong Kong. A lot of the Chinese stocks are listed over in Hong Kong, and this is what that shows. And what is it showing right now? It's showing that really since 2019 or 2021 or so, the Hang Seng has just been on a downtrend. The 20-month moving average has been going down, 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 down. Right now, you got a very, very nice potential Adam and potential Eve bottom over here. And something that's very interesting has happened over here. 20-month moving average is curling upwards. So that tells me that potentially there's a little bit of a trend change over here. Interestingly, the Bollinger Band is also a little bit squeezing here on the monthly, right? So if you're, all of this is basically telling you that China's printing money to try and save their economy. But you already knew that, because if you look at Bitcoin, like, where do you think all this money comes from, right? If it's not coming from the US, China's been trying to print money, print their way out of it. Global liquidity has been increasing this election year. There's not really any particular reasons to think that Bitcoin's topped, because there's still money coming into the system, right? Another thing I also like to think about is these things generally go in cycles. And guess what also happens to run in a cycle? What ends up happening running in a cycle is this thing right here, which is called the IWM, which I talk a lot about. It's really a very good indicator in terms of what global liquidity does. And it goes in cycles. Cycles number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And right now we might be beginning a cycle number 5, right? If you look at the Ichimoku cloud on the monthly, and I pull up the Tenkan and Kijun, each time when you have a cross, it begins a new cycle. That means there's increasing global liquidity coming, not just pumping Bitcoin, not just pumping Chinese stocks, but also pumping the small caps, right? These small caps are more economically sensitive, right? Each time you have a cross, it keeps on going for about 2 or 3 years, cross, 2 or 3 years, cross, a year and a half, right? And you just had a cross just a few months ago, so there's no reason to think that global liquidity has really slowed down. Looks like we're developing a little bit of a bull trend even for the small caps, right? So a lot of things are really kind of telling you that Bitcoin's probably going to go going higher after this consolidation right underneath very, very important resistance. Right? So that's another particular reason for me to feel that way. And then finally, there's one thing that is just absolutely beautiful when you look at a monthly chart, which is to look at the RSI. First of all, RSI hasn't really been overbought by Bitcoin standards. Each time whenever the cycle ends up hitting up top, you end up hitting some pretty parabolic zone up here with the RSI trend line that's been ongoing for quite some time. And you generally are not really that worried that the cycle is over until it really hits the top of the trend line down here, right? Sometimes even if it hits the top of the trend line, like it did over here, it can go down and it can still make another higher high. Sometimes when you hit the trend line up here, like it did over here, it can go down, even if the RSI doesn't really quite hit the top, even though there's a big giant bearish divergence, which is probably why price end up dropping a lot afterwards. You can still have diminished RSI and still make a higher high, right? Right now, we're not even really close to this RSI trend line yet. I think that we can start talking about topping whenever the Bollinger Band really starts to expand down all the way, and whenever you're really actually hitting the RSI up here in this trend line. That's when I really would get worried. I think the greedy people, the greedy whales, are still not done yet. They're probably going to end up pumping Bitcoin up a lot higher. And I think we're probably just in the middle of it. And I would like to stay in it. I would like to stay in Bitcoin. I like to stay in instruments that allow me to absorb gains from Bitcoin. And I would like to see what happens as it continues to go up. I can talk about price targets and all that, but I think a lot of people have different price targets and a lot of people have come to different conclusions in terms of that. I'm not going to be too cute about it. I'm just going to follow these indicators. I have my thoughts, but those are just my thoughts in terms of price targets. We'll see what happens as things go along, but I do think that this resistance over here is going to break. A lot of people are shorting Bitcoin down here. a lot of people are thinking, they're not thinking cycles, they're thinking this is a triple top. If you feel that way, I don't know what else to say. Have a good one. Bye.